So what happened was one day I got a phone call from the chief of psychiatry at the Northport VA Medical Center out on Long Island. And she says, Bruce, you're not going to believe this, but we actually have a doctor working here treating our nation's heroes who spent time in prison for poisoning his coworkers. And I looked at the phone, I looked at my calendar and says, is this like April 1st, like an April Fool's Day? I couldn't believe that in the VA system, we would actually hire a doctor who spent time in prison for poisoning his coworkers. But I was wrong. That's exactly what we did. And his name was Michael Swango, right? And I'll tell you a little bit briefly about Michael Swango. When he was in medical school, he was referred to as 00 Swango, licensed to kill.
Hey, they could have done better with that one. I would have gone Swango Unchained. But
that movie hadn't come out yet.
True.
So.
True.
Because it seemed like every time he visited patients, they would die unexpectedly. And they went to the dean and they said, hey, Dean, we don't think Swango should be a doctor. And by the way, Swango is an ex-Marine with an honorable discharge. And the dean said, I don't care what you guys think. You're only the students. I'm the dean. I think he just needs a little extra training. So they gave him a little extra training. And he winds up going to Ohio State University Medical Center.
Whoa, that's where I went. That's where I went to school. Okay.
Yeah.
He's a Buckeye.
And there was a young student there, a gymnast. Her name was Cynthia McGee. Cynthia McGee gets in a car accident with another student. And she's actually improving in the hospital until she gets a visit from Dr. Swango. And then she dies unexpectedly. Well, what do you think happened? Did Swango get charged with that? No. The other student who had hit her with his car gets charged with vehicular homicide. But he didn't kill Cynthia McGee. It was actually Swango. And patients start dying unexpectedly, but they can't prove it's Swango because these cases are incredibly difficult to prove. But eventually Swango leaves and he goes to his first love, as you mentioned, being an EMT. Right? Because he loved the excitement of being an EMT. And when he would periodically bring in some snacks and things for his coworkers, including donuts that were sprinkled with arsenic. And then he
would... Wow.
That's like bad television. What the hell?
And I like how you say it's just so calmly, like this is another day at the JOB for you, which it kind of is, I guess.
And then he would call them up and ask them to tell him, what were the symptoms? Tell me what was wrong with you. See, he wanted to relive the excitement twice. Once by actually poisoning them, and then the second time by listening to how they suffered from the poisoning. So about a month or two later, he brings in some iced tea, but these EMTs were not stupid. They had it tested. It was loaded with arsenic. The police did an excellent investigation. They went to his home. They found all kinds of poisons. And he gets sentenced to 3 years for poisoning his coworkers.
3 years? God damn. I'm going to start, if that's all it takes, and I've got a better lawyer than he does, for sure.
Yeah.
You guys are fucked. We're going to start poisoning everybody. 3 years, huh?
Oh, wait. It actually gets better. Because he comes out of prison. Now, I didn't think in the United States of America that you could spend time in prison for poisoning your coworkers and come out and be a physician, but I was wrong. Because he comes out and he's very, very clever. You know, the sociopath is very, very clever, and he has a great way of speaking with people and convincing people of his story. And he starts changing documents and altering things, and he convinces people. Well, he says, you know what? I'm a tough ex-Marine, so I spent 6 months in prison because of a barroom brawl. But here's a letter from the governor restoring my civil rights. And they bought into it. Next thing you know, he's working at a VA hospital on the West Coast. And he meets a nurse, a VA nurse, and they get engaged. And everything's wonderful. Until the story comes out that he had spent time in prison for poisoning his coworkers. And his fiancée, she keeps getting a lot of headaches and break up, and she goes home to Virginia to mom and dad, and she said, I really loved this guy Swango. I thought he was the man of my dreams. And then this story came out. I just can't take it anymore. So she goes to the park, she takes out a gun, and she blows her brains out.
Jesus Christ.
Well, you can't blame Swango for that, can you? Well, actually, you can, because even though the body was cremated, the family kept a lock of her hair, and we kept the hair, and it was loaded with arsenic. So Swango was even poisoning his own fiance.
Would that be like, even without the poison, though, isn't there something available, like depraved heart murder for a situation like that as well, where the person gets forced into a suicidal situation? I don't know if, it's hard to prove that shit, I guess, but having arsenic in the bloodstream or in the hair is that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, it's pretty convincing.
Especially coming from her fiance with a long history of this. Yeah. So anyway, he jumps around the country, and the next thing you know, he winds up going to Stony Brook University Medical Center on Long Island,
New York, yeah.
And he's going for a residency, and guess what field that it's in? It's actually in psychiatry, which means he had to go in front of a board of trained psychiatrists and convince them that he should be in their medical program. And he was so convincing that he convinced this board of psychiatrists to allow him. And Stony Brook University has a teaching arrangement with the Northport VA Medical Center. And that's how he wound up in my neighborhood in Northport. And then I got that call that I told you about. And I found it hard to believe, but I said, I have to go meet this guy. So I hop in the car with one of my agents and go visit him at the Northport VA Medical Center. And this is a handsome, charming, ex-Marine physician. If I didn't know better, I'd probably want to introduce him to my daughter. If she brought home this ex-Marine physician, I'd go, holy cow, yes.
Yeah.
All right. And he was very handsome and charming, and he started with that same, story that he gave everybody else. And then I said, well, that's really interesting, doctor, but, we have this story. Would you mind if I just kind of look around your room and, just kind of search here? And that's when he completely changed his tune, wouldn't allow us to search. I call up the U.S. attorney, who would not give me a search warrant because we didn't have any evidence that he committed any crime out in Northport, VA. And next thing you know, the guy's gone. And he goes to Zimbabwe, Africa, because there's a shortage of physicians there. And when he went to Zimbabwe, Africa, he killed women and children and pregnant women, poisoned his landlady. And now he wants to go on to Saudi Arabia. But in order to go on to Saudi Arabia, he had to return to the United States to renew his passport. And that's when we arrested him, but not for murder, because at the time we didn't have any evidence that he murdered anybody. We actually arrested him for what I would say is every federal agent's favorite crime. That's lying to the government, false statements to the government, because he lied on his application about his background. All right. So he lied to me and he lied to the government. And now he gets, again, 3 years in jail for lying to me and lying to the government on his applications. And that gave us a window of 3 years to try to determine if he murdered any veterans at the VA Medical Center. And that's how the investigation began.
Holy shit.
And it turned out that he had killed several dozen people, right? Just inside the VA system itself?
Well, within the VA, you know what? It's always difficult to say the exact number. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Swango himself can't even remember the exact number. We were able to positively prove that he killed 3 veterans at the Northport VA Medical Center.